Hello everybody. Good evening. Where I am it's evening, 6 p.m. It's the POP Baking Club and this week we are doing a Blondie. And I'm very excited. I've baked it twice and I've been working on it all weekend. I'm just so excited because it's really fun to work on an item knowing that we're all going to do it together, and I look at these recipes so differently now that everyone's doing them because I love them and I know I've shared them with a lot of people, but to just ask all of you to make it and everything is like, woo. So it's a lot of responsibility, but I'm very excited about it. To think that we can bake in our own homes and then get together and talk like this is just amazing. And so tonight we're going to be doing a Blondie recipe that I developed years ago, probably 8 years ago, with a bunch of students in my class. We were getting interested in the way that the classes worked is that once our first semester students were sort of on autopilot and everybody was doing their jobs. I think if you are an engineer and you're working with me, you might relate to some of the stuff that I'm doing because I love looking at percentages and analyzing things a little bit differently. And it's not because I'm sciencey or mathy, because I'm not. It's because I want to control the outcome and do the best. And maybe that's what engineers do anyway. Maybe engineers aren't just about math. Maybe engineers are about, making sure the bridge doesn't fall or that, that things work. Maybe it's the same thing. I love fellow cooks and bakers and anybody. There's so many people who say they watch these and they don't bake, and I think that's great too. I used to watch Sit and Be Fit, that yoga class on PBS and I would just eat my lunch. I wouldn't do it. So I get that. There are a lot of bakers who work in STEM. That's so interesting, Amna, because I always believed I was not good at math and science for a lot of reasons. And now I'm realizing that there's just a lot of different routes to get there. And I think that if you have like a real desire to do things a certain way and you're methodical and all that, then, maybe I'm more mathy and sciencey than I ever thought, because I've definitely found my crew. I love Sit and Be Fit. I just loved it. I don't know why. It was on at like noon on PBS. Eve, hi, I'm a college student pursuing finance, but I love baking. Awesome. Who doesn't love baking? And if you don't love baking and you're here, I know you have, you might be an eater. We love bakers and we need eaters. So everybody, we all have to be functioning as one. I am organized, not in a crazy way or a way that's anxious. Everything I have has a home and a place and it lives somewhere and it's very easy. It's actually for simplicity. So I find that people who do the baking tend to be more organized and a little more persnickety about a lot of things. But I think that those people are taught that it's bad that they have these desires to do that, to coordinate things, organize, categorize things. But I actually think baking gives people a really nice, healthy outlet for that. So I have a huge audience that has OCD, ADHD, and all kinds of other things. And I think some of the practices that I employ really help with those tendencies because they give you a physical practice of how to put things in order. So you don't have to be scattered. That's why everything I do is so physical and you can look at it and organize it. It works out really great. Okay, anyway. Starry Dust says, I realized too that I'm pretty good at math after years of thinking, what is that? What was it in class that made me feel like shut down and not want to do math anymore? And then to just really get, major anxiety. I get sweaty. I can't handle it. Nancy says, same, my eyes glaze over with math. I really get worried, but now that I'm doing food math, it just makes sense. It's kind of like when they say if you want to know percentages, look at a pizza and things like fractions and stuff like that. Baking through time gave me the skills to do math in a way that I just couldn't do on a piece of paper. And as an instructor, I took teaching just as importantly as I did chefing. So I was always looking at 3 ways to give people what they need. So I'll start with this. If you need my recipe, the recipe, it is on the link tree. You can print it out. If you don't have it, it's not a big deal. I do recommend though you get a pen and paper or something, your iPad to take notes, because I've added a few details to the method as I've been researching, just kind of little nuances if you want to take notes. But it's always good to have something written, something you can visually look at, and something you can hear. That's one thing. And I also am doing, this is my ingredient function chart, and this lives on Substack. And you can print it out from over there. So that's exclusive to Substack. I just joined Substack, and I'm going to start writing more ingredient function. Not so much a blog, but just like one day it'll just be like fat or butter, and it'll be the stuff, you know, that you need to know. It'll be bulleted and kind of nice and easy, and it's a lot like how I think. But I mean, me doing spreadsheets, this is all my brownie extravaganza, and I don't know how to print it any other way. I'm gonna have to get bigger paper. But these green ones, Grief or Go, these are my favorites. This one I did most recently, and then they go through ones I really like, but they don't meet the criteria, and then the ones I don't like. So anyway, this is how I look at everything in percentages, and I compare, and I start to see patterns. But even then, my brain just has a lot of fun. It's really hard to figure it all out. So, because a lot of what I do is to create systems that create a sense of control, a sense of being able to, I mean, and again, I always have to say I'm not that way, but like NASA does a HACCP thing. They invented HACCP plans, and HACCP plans are critical control points that you can go back to and say, this is where it went wrong. So if you are working on any of my recipes and something went wrong, you should be able to go back and figure out what it is if you did the things that I have suggested that you do. If you don't, I'm like, oh, I'm out. You don't have an oven thermometer, you're not scaling in grams, you know, these kinds of things. It's going to make it hard for you to track your progress. So I think they help. I've been told they do. So I am happy to have all these incredible different people that are actually really different than me and make me a little bit nervous. But I like that because it kind of shows that no matter how expert you are at one niche, you're not at others, and we're all learning. That's why I say I learned from you guys, and you're learning something from me, I hope. Wonderful. But how to join to get recipes. All you need to do is go to my link tree on my profile page, and this recipe lives there. And I put 3 of the recipes up. One for a half sheet, one for a quarter sheet, and one for a 9x13. And I adjusted the 9x13 so it was too thin, and I'll show you what I did, and so you'll know what to do. Rim says, your approach has made me so much more comfortable with baking. I'm not scared of making a mistake. Good. And even if you do, if you can backtrack and learn something from it, then it's not a waste of time or money. Grilled cheese. Kathleen, TikTok sober when the app shut down. I'm back. Oh my gosh. I hate that they're messing with the app. They completely messed up my algorithm. I just am so bummed. So actually I'm bummed, but I have to say, I was like, okay, well, you can't control this. So what can you control? And I can control this baking club. And I can't even believe, I don't know how many people are here, like 62, that across the world we can bake together and get together and talk about it. It's just amazing. I'm so happy that I lived long enough to see this because I think it's great. All right, well, it is dark here, so I hope the lighting's okay. I rent the apartment that I work out of, so it's all kind of what I get is what I get. I can't make a ton of adjustments. But I'm going to start with a quick overview of the recipe. And if it's really hard for me to lecture and demo and then pay attention to the screen. And I've literally spent my career trying to gain focus and ignore the craziness in the kitchen. And when you do that, I mean, literally anyone can drop something, yell at me, anything, and I won't notice because I have trained myself to be focused. And it's not that I can't do demos, but in real life, there's a real back and forth. And here, I just feel like I'm ignoring you. All right, so let's see how we can get started here. I set my oven, which is a propane oven. I set my oven to 345 because I know that I have an oven that's hot, and I know that'll bring me down to around 350. And I'm going to toast the pecans that are in the recipe right now, and then I'm going to adjust the camera, and then I'm going to start to work and give my lecture, if that's okay with you guys. Okay. Can you record lives and upload them later? Yes, thanks for asking, because I've been doing that. I've been putting them on YouTube. So you can actually get the entire thing. And I gotta tell you, it's such an editing job. Oh my gosh, it's such a pain. But I take the whole 2.5 hours and I edit it down to 45 minutes to 50 minutes so that you guys can watch just a video. So now you can go to YouTube and watch the whole thing, which is, I think, really, really fun. All right, let me get my apron on. I'm gonna wash my hands. Yep, I do. I put them on YouTube. It's under the Practice of Pastry. I'm watching them, and that was kind of my goal, is that everybody would be able to work and go back over stuff if they missed it, especially some of the technical stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go over the ingredients really fast just so you can know what we're working on. And I tonight am going to be doing the half sheet pan. And so I printed it out, and for those of you who haven't used this, ingredients are here and they're in categories of the ones that you use together. Let's say the dries, the fats, the ones you cream together, the eggs. And then this green box, this column here, is the number we're working off of, the middle one. It's our 100%. 100% in this recipe is a full sheet pan. So 50% is a half sheet pan, and that is what I have and what I'll be using. So it's a 50%, and so that's why it will say percent of recipe, 50%. That's what we're using. And these are the grams. These ounces and stuff are just for estimation purposes, and then this is baker's percentage. And it's cool because we've got it estimated to a whole and then to the hundreds. So you can get as detailed as you want. Okay, so the Blondie is a recipe that I developed with the use of my students. And once, you know, the first semester students were mine, and they were the ones that I indoctrinated into how to be in the kitchen. That was the big thing, how to work in the kitchen and do a good job and, you know, be able to use all the equipment and focus and that kind of thing. I used to teach at community colleges, and I no longer do. I'm doing this. So we developed this recipe as a group, and I flat out said, I'm not really into Blondies. I think they're boring and they have no flavor. But as a group, everybody was like, we want to do it. And you always have 3 or 4 students who want to work on these side projects. So we defined what we wanted. I wanted more flavor. I didn't want it to be, you know, just sweet and a blonde version of a brownie. I wanted it to be caramelized, rich. I wanted it to be chewy and have really good texture. And we wanted it to be chewy. I wanted to have interest and a little bit of color, but I really wanted to be caramelized and different. So we wanted it to be really luxurious. And if you have looked at the ingredients and the percentages, you'll see that this is very luxurious, almost, I would argue, very expensive, because there's a lot of vanilla bean paste in it, and it's not persnickety. But what is really great about lessons like this is how you can take something boring, whether it's a brownie or a Blondie or a chocolate chip cookie, and you can make it extraordinary. And not through all the obvious avenues, but like through special avenues where you think like each ingredient and you treat each ingredient to where you want it to be, and you get it where, you know, your end goal is. And so for us, we're going with deep caramelization, extraordinarily moist, not overly sweet, because the bitterness of the caramelization, it's not bitter, but is balanced. So anyway, so here's what we're doing. I love the novelty of, okay. All right, so we have pastry flour, baking powder, sea salt, butter, brown sugar, eggs, vanilla bean paste, white chocolate chips, and pecans. So I have all those things here, and as I work, I'll explain to you what's going on. So for pastry flour, I did get some questions where people said they didn't have pastry flour. Pastry flour is actually really kind of hard to find, but you can get it at King Arthur. They have a pastry blend that's half AP and half pastry, but you want pastry. Pastry flour is 8%, and it says right on there, it tells you exactly what it is. So it's made with a soft wheat, and this is going to keep the whole thing tender. So you can use AP flour, but if you use AP flour, you're going to have to mix it very carefully. You're just going to have to be a little more aware of what's going on than if you use pastry flour. So I have pastry flour, and I have quite a bit, 669 grams. And I broke that up into 2. Do you prefer King Arthur over Swan? Swan's is cake flour, and it's a lower percentage, and I looked it up today. So it's not exactly the same as pastry flour, and Bob's Red Mill stopped carrying or stopped producing it. So you can't get pastry flour all the time. Now, we developed this recipe to keep it tender. So you don't really want to go all the way to cake flour. That might be not enough structure, but if you use AP, just be careful when you add the flour to not overdo it. Okay, I gotta do the pecans and we'll come back to the talk. You are exactly right. All right, let me tell you this too. Where are my pecans? Okay, so there are a couple ingredients I get ready at the very last minute. So I don't scale vanilla bean paste until the last minute or brown sugar until the last minute, and I don't chop my pecans until right before I start working. But this is a lot, so I did it before we got here because it just would take a long time and I knew that I would get distracted. So we are using a half sheet tray, and I'm using a half sheet tray just to toast my pecans. Single tray parchment paper, okay? This Blondie is gonna be this thick. So when you toast nuts, you wanna make sure that if we're going to get cooked again in the oven, that you're not overdoing them or underdoing them. So we are going to toast these, not to color. We're going to toast them to fragrance. We're gonna smell them and they're gonna be fragrant, and I'm gonna do at 350 for about 4 minutes. I always take my spidey fingers and spread them out like this because you want surface area. You can see how these are chopped. I don't want them too small and I don't want them too big. And if you buy, you know, the whole pieces, you're gonna pay more. So you might as well buy the chopped up pecans, but even then, you're going to want to chop them to make them even. I like everything to be even and be the same size. So I'm gonna go pop this in the oven for 4 minutes. And my doneness indicator is going to be that you can smell them, that you're going to be able to smell them and you're going to know that something is in the oven. So this is 341 grams of pecans. I use spidey fingers for my granola and everything. I save the label and I put it over here. So I have my oven at 345, but you want to be around 350. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do last minute real quick. I need brown sugar, and I need 900 grams of brown sugar. And just so you know, one bag like this is 907 grams. If that tells you anything, this is a very, very brown sugar forward recipe. So I'm going to get my scale. Because I've scaled quite a bit, I know that most ingredients will go up to 500 grams in a large deli, but this is fluffy. So I'm gonna use 2, and because I need 900 grams, I am going to do, 450 in each. Now the reason I do not, and I have a strict rule against scaling brown sugar in advance, is not because it's gonna dry out in 5 minutes or an hour, but because if something comes up and you leave it in a container, it just is going to get hard. And I know there's a million things you can do to soften it back up, but when I get the little bits in my batter and I feel like it's ruining my batter, I just wish I'd gone back and waited. So that's the honest truth. I'm using light brown sugar, and it honestly doesn't matter. I would argue in this recipe, because it bakes so dark, that you can go ahead and stay with light. And I did a bunch of research about the difference between light and dark, and there isn't a ton. There's none moisture-wise, and there's not a ton flavor-wise, which really surprised me. So use light brown. I am baking a Blondie, and the Blondie recipe is on my link tree if you want to join in and bake it with us, or at least follow along. So right now I am scaling the brown sugar because it's going to be nice and moist. And even in a commercial setting, I never bought a big 50-pound bag, because it would always get hard. In all the classrooms I ever worked in, we would end up throwing it away. So I would buy boxes of 20 of these instead. So I'm gonna do 450. See if I can scale quickly in front of you. 450, see? I got lucky, you guys brought me good luck. Whenever you scale right on the nose, that's good luck. It's gonna be a good bake. 450 equals 900. Now if I make a mistake and I don't have a label, although I do have a label, no I don't. But I'm not gonna forget it. All right, 450. Okay, so the pecans sound like the alarm's done. Now a timer doesn't tell you when something is ready, it tells you when something's in the oven, so I'm gonna go check. So I can tell just by looking that there's a bit of darkness on here, and I don't want a ton of darkness. So I'm gonna call this done. that this recipe has been very well balanced for flavor and texture. So I have scaled the brown sugar at the last minute to keep it from drying out. I'm going to scale my vanilla bean paste. Now this is a half sheet. That's what I thought. 66 grams of vanilla bean paste. It's a lot. I don't even know if I have enough. I just ordered a new bottle. Now, if this were under 20 grams, I would use a mini scale, which is normally what you do when you're using vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste. But because it's 66, I need a regular scale. This is just a lot. The reason that I don't scale this ahead is because it also dries out. Okay, so I was saying, it's not that when you scale things ahead that they're going to dry out in 2 minutes. It's that if something comes up, which people never expected to, but if something comes up and you leave it one night, you're going to end up losing your extract. You're going to end up losing your brown sugar. And I used to have students all the time. I mean, someone would scale all their stuff and then they didn't come to school the next day and all those ingredients would get ruined. So I'm a little hypersensitive about it. And I have the pecans toasted until fragrant. So we are making the Blondie, no color, and they're chopped. I'm going to scale out the eggs so that I can show you how I do it because I get a lot of questions about the eggs. And once I do that, then we'll be going. Oh, I do have a label. So there's the brown sugar. See, that's part of my system right there in action. I always take the lid and put the label on it when I scale, and then I add it to my ingredients that I've already done. And if there's a lid with an ingredient, then it reminds me. So it's right here. 300 grams of egg and 66 of vanilla beans. So I'm just gonna put this here. So it's all coming together. So this is literally how I scale eggs. 300 grams of egg. These eggs are clearly 2 different sizes. Can you toast the pecans in advance? I suggest you do because right now they're cooling and they'll be cool by the time I mix the batter. And I want them to be cool so that they don't warm up or melt the white chocolate chips. So we need 300 grams of egg. These are different sizes, but I'm still gonna say they're 50. I'm estimating, okay? 2 is 100 grams, 200 grams, 300 grams plus an extra. So that's how I work. I'm gonna put these back in here. And I could have done this earlier and these could sit cracked and scaled in my refrigerator for up to a week, which is so convenient. But I wanted to show you how I do it. I don't crack eggs on a scale. I get 2 deli cups, 1 for the shells and 1 for catching it. And I use a paper towel to keep the table relatively clean. My hands are already clean because I washed them. But after I'm done cracking these eggs, I'm going to stir them together. And then I'm going to scale 300, and that will be what I use for my recipe. And I'm also going to sanitize and wash my hands after I touch these eggs. The other beauty of this is that whatever eggs are left over, I can label. I don't need to know how much they weigh. I just label them whole egg. I put them in the refrigerator with a date label, and then I can use them tomorrow when I bake. So there's less waste. You're not throwing away even 20 grams of egg. It's perfect. All right, so let me wash my hands. When you're working with eggs, it's a matter of cross-contamination and keeping things separated and not using your hands to take bacteria from one area to another. So I'm not going to whip these. I'm just going to break them up so that they're not globbing together. So when I pour them out to scale, they don't all ploop. So see how I'm just breaking up the protein strands that are sort of tight. And these are room temp. I've had the eggs out since around 1 p.m. my time. And I don't want any of the yolks to be whole. Now, I could like be a little more aggressive. I could use a fork. I could use a spoon. I could do whatever I want. But I usually just like gravity, and I like gravity and time. There are times when I am in a hurry, but if I'm in a hurry and I'm pushing a recipe, it's not a good thing. It's because someone messed up. Probably me, but somebody did. Okay. I don't like to be rushed. That's the thing. A lot of pastry chefs don't like to be rushed. And when we are working, we have to create situations, you know, where we have a sense of urgency. So I'm going to compost my eggs. I haven't touched anything else. I'm gonna wash my hands again. And I sincerely wash my hands a lot when I am handling eggs. Because even though I have to do it 3 or 4 times to prevent cross-contamination, at least I know I'm like safe. So I need 300 grams. I'm gonna estimate that I need a medium deli, because usually it's less than 500. If I get it exact, it's gonna be good luck because of you guys. And I like scaling. That's why I scale this way, and I do all of my stuff on one day. I'll scale 5 or 6 recipes. I hope I don't go over. Oh, there we are. So we're at 300. I'm not going to touch that. What I'm going to do is take this leftover, and I'm going to transfer it very quickly with the date. Into here, and this is going to go in my refrigerator. So my hands are still clean. I haven't touched anything. This is all clean. Into the cooler, and then I can use these tomorrow. I think that example alone shows you how great the system is. Okay, so now I have egg here, and I have this that I've touched. I don't like to spray sanitizer anywhere near food, but I am going to use a paper towel to clean up. This is my dirty hand, and this is my sanitizer. So I'm going to take a paper towel and spray the paper towel. And then I'm going to sanitize my scale and the countertop. That's it, and then I'm ready to go. So normally I would have had those eggs scaled, but I really just wanted to show you how it works when I actually scale the eggs, because I get a lot of questions about how do you scale one, yolk, or how do you scale just egg whites. I do it exactly the same way. You crack them all, you estimate, and then you crack them together. Nothing crazy about food safety. I get the food safety news report every day, and there are food outbreaks literally every day. People die of salmonella, of norovirus, of all these, listeria. There are a lot of foodborne illnesses that are going around, and if you take precautions, you are showing your self-care and also anyone you love, especially if you know someone pregnant, who's very young, immune compromised, or very old. You wash your hands in between things. So if I touch raw egg or crack an egg, because just so you know, salmonella does not live inside the egg. You think you're touching the exterior, or your chickens don't have salmonella. Salmonella lives inside the chicken, and when they lay an egg, the salmonella is on it and inside of it. It's in the egg. That's why you have to cook it. If you've touched an egg, you should wash your hands. If you've cracked them, do you know that only 45% of all people, they've taken surveys, wash their hands? Okay, I'm gonna stop because I could go on and on. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna show you a couple really quick ingredient issues that you're going to maybe have questions about. So I tasted the Calabo white chocolate chips, and I've always liked them, and I know a lot of people hate white chocolate, and just so you know, these are going to get really caramelized in this brownie. They're gonna be like brown. They don't taste like white chocolate chips. But I tasted a white chocolate chip and compared it to this Calabo white chocolate, because this is not a chocolate chip, even though it looks like a chocolate chip. This is so much superior. I got this at Restaurant Depot. This is chalky and overly sweet. It's really actually not good. I'm actually a little disappointed. So just so you know, this is what I used in this recipe. And people ask me about sea salt all the time. For the exact same price, you can get a pound, 10 ounces, or 750 grams of this for like $6.50. Maldon salt at 8 ounces is exactly the same price. So when you're looking at Maldon salt or those really fancy decorative finishing salts, you don't want to be using those in your food. You're missing the point, number one, and number two, it's just really expensive. So this brand I recommend, fine sea salt. What's a secondary? I don't have a secondary because this is very economical, and I know I get it at the Restaurant Depot, but if you look at it, it's 2.5 kilograms or 5.5 pounds. I haven't tried other brands. You know, I like Guittard, and I'm shocked that I didn't like the Ghirardelli because I always have. Yeah, and it's pricey, and this is quite a bit. You need 512 grams, so that's a lot. So this is what that looks like in a large deli. So that's what I use, and this is my sea salt, which I use all the time, and all the pastry shops, all the bakeries I've ever worked at use this brand. Now I have all my toasted pecans over there, and I don't take them and put them back in a deli cup because they'll get sweaty. So I want them to dry out after they've released some of their oils and gotten a little freshened, and just let them cool. That way the moisture can evaporate. If you put them back into a container to save space, they're going to sweat and get mushy. You don't want to do that because we want to dry them out, because as you dry them out and release the oils, then you can start caramelizing the proteins when it's baking in the oven. I am making a Blondie, and the recipe is on the link tree. It's a Blondie that has a ton of brown sugar in it, white chocolate chips, pecans, and it's baked until it's super dark. And I have some, and I'm going to show you, but I want to wait. All right, so we're going to get started. So I have pastry flour, 8% protein. It's going to give us a nice, soft, tender chew. I've got baking powder. Baking powder is baking soda plus a little bit of cornstarch. The cornstarch keeps it dry because the acid, which is really like some kind of a salt acid, is activated by moisture and heat. So when I mix this up, CO2 is going to start, bubbles are going to start with the activation of moisture that lives in the eggs and the vanilla bean paste, and the water that lives in the butter is going to start to activate this. But they call it double acting because it's going to hold back creating gas, CO2, until the heat hits it. And it's not going to do that until later, a little bit later in baking, when magically your flour and everything is able to hold itself up. Because if you release all the gas and everything's just mushy, things need to start going and then dry out. Your cell walls are like this. That's what a bubble in a cake is. So if you had gas all at the beginning of baking, it would just collapse. I love diamond crystal salt, and I have that. I am not using kosher salt in this recipe, but you can. And you can do it by weight. So if you were doing a 1/4 teaspoon of something, sea salt that's fine and kosher, you'd have a problem. But when we do it by weight, it's 1 for 1, okay? So you can use that, and I do use the diamond. That's my favorite. It dissolves nicely, and it has a nice clean flavor. All baking powder these days is double acting. They don't even need to say it, but they do. And double acting means moisture and then heat. So you're getting it when you mix it, but not all of it, and then you're getting the rest later when you get some heat. So the next thing I do is, when I showed you my Blondie recipe and I said that the ingredients are listed in order that you use them and then grouped, I do that on my table. So I'm going to take the pastry flour and the dries, the salt, and I look and I verify. I have 15 grams and I have 18 of the baking powder, and then I put the butter here, and the butter goes in the bowl with the brown sugar, so they're going to go together. And then I have the eggs separate, and then the pecans and the brown white chocolate are separate. Now I've made one change to the recipe. I was reading about vanilla bean paste today, and I think that I'm going to add it to the butter because fat is a conduit for flavor, and it is liquid, and so I'm not going to hold back with the egg. Because I know this recipe well, I'm going to go ahead and make an adjustment and add it here. Now typically I take my butter and put it in a plastic Cambrel bowl, but I'm going to do it in here. Part of that is because pastry chefs and chefs in general don't like to use a lot of dishes. Secondly, I don't want people to worry that I'm burning or melting this and I'm causing myself more problems, because obviously plastic is not good if you are overcooking something in the microwave, okay? But I am not cooking this butter. I am melting it to where it's still viscous. There might actually still be small chunks in it. I don't want it to be hot. I don't need it hot to necessarily melt the sugar. I just need it to be melted so these two can go together. And they'll be closer in temp anyway. If you want to become a label reader, it's life-changing. And a lot of you probably are. I can tell a lot of you probably are. I find it fascinating that when you read something you think's one thing and you read the ingredients, just like the baking powder, you see that it's got 4 ingredients in it or 3 or whatever. It's amazing. So I'm going to put this in the microwave the way that it is. If I find that it's too dense, I'll go back to a bowl. But I was thinking today, I want to see if I can just save a dish and do this. So I'm going to leave the lid just on, and I'm going to start 30 seconds. Now I have a teeny tiny little cheap microwave because I only use it for melting like glucose, gelatin, and butter, and chocolate. But it's not super tall. So if I didn't have one that was tall enough, then I would put it in a bowl. Yeah, if you're experimenting and reducing sugars on brownies and doing any kind of experiment, not only do you have to work in grams, but you have to know the percentages of water that lives in your butter and all kinds of stuff. So that's recipe development, and it's insanely detailed. These are my bowls. Typically I would use this to like melt my butter, but I'm gonna see if this works. And I use a really short little spatula. So virtually nothing's happened. It's softened just a little bit. I'm gonna keep going. Another 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna set up for my mixing. We are doing the creaming method, except we're melting the butter. If you were to do the creaming method with regular butter, you're going to take these sugar crystals, and brown sugar is just sucrose crystals that have molasses sort of painted on them. These are going to cut holes into your, butter, your room temperature butter. And those holes are going to fill with gas later. And you, in that case, can really only add the air cells that are going to live in your baked good, the air cells, on the mixer. When you melt your butter, and this is starting to gently melt, when you melt your butter, you're no longer able to cut through this with sucrose. So now you have a different solution. You have more of a hydrated sugar solution. So if you start messing with the amount of sugar, which is hygroscopic and needs a certain amount, and if it doesn't get a certain amount, it's going to take it away from all the other ingredients. It's going to bully all the other ingredients. Let me see if this fits. Too risky. Yeah, changing sugar is a big deal. I've noticed that you refer to granulated white sugar as sucrose. Can you say why? I refer to it as sucrose because in my kitchen I have so many, and they are defined by a couple things. The size of the grain, you have coarse sugar, you have super fine sugar, and it goes through the milling process, like what's the most fine. 10X, which is powdered sugar that's been milled 10 times, is the most fine grain. And then you have sugars that are defined by what they do. You might have a sanding sugar or a decorative sugar. Then you have raw sugar. So if I say to you get the sucrose, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. And I love looking at butter because this is exactly when you see how much it resembles cream. You start to see the water and the solids and the separation. And butterfat's amazing. It's made up of these, I think they're fatty acids that are all different. So when you put butter in your mouth, there are some that melt right away, some that melt in the middle, and some that melt at the end. That's why the mouthfeel of butter is so superior. Okay, so what I'm looking at right here is there are no chunks, so it's not even hardly warm, but it's melted. And there is a little bit solid right here, so I'm going to scrape it and get it in. But I'm gonna leave this because I don't need to put it back in the microwave and get it hot. Now the other thing I like to do, and I'll show you, I live in a cold part of the country, of the world, and so I have really cold countertops. So I don't want to put this on the countertop because butter is so sensitive, it'll get solid on the bottom. And so I use an insulator. This is a cork trivet from IKEA, and I love them. Now the other reason I wanted to use the deli cup is because when I pour anything into my mixer, it's a lot easier to pour out of a deli cup than it is out of a bowl, and I tend to make less of a mess. So that was sort of my impulse for wanting to do it this way. I am doing the Blondie recipe, and it's on my link tree if you are interested. So now I'm going to take the things that are going in the bowl, and I'm going to put them over here, and I'm going to grab a bowl and a paddle. Now I'm going to add all of the brown sugar, even though it's quite a bit, because I made this twice, and I know that the amount of butter will soften it so quickly that it's not going to fall out of my bowl. And this this is about how much is in there. So this is going to go on here. And I never dump ingredients, so I would never take this and just pour it in and then start the mixer. I'm always going to either add liquid slowly or I'm going to add dries in thirds. Now I could sift all of my dries before I begin adding the butter, but I want this to paddle on low so that the sugars can start to dissolve and it can become a little more cohesive. And I know that I have about a minute to do all my sifting. But once I add the flour to any moisture, I can't walk away. I can't leave the machine on. I cannot keep it moving because if I do, I'll overwork the gluten. And gluten's like this. And the kind of flour we're using, let's say this is bread flour and this is AP. We're like this. Gluten is like all kind of discombobulated, and once it hits water, the proteins begin to unravel and then they look around and they start connecting. And then all the wet stuff that's in between creates like membranes around all of it, and that's what holds air bubbles. So we don't want to overactivate these so they're tight. We want to keep them like this. The other thing about butter and keeping the gluten from grabbing on is just like if you have a ton of butter on your hands and you go try to grab your other hand, it's going to slide. The high amount of butter is making those gluten strands like they can't. They're much more tender. So it all works together and it's just fascinating. So we're not going to get as much aeration. We're going to get a little dissolving and a little cohesion and a little bit of an emulsion, things starting to come together, but we aren't going to add a lot of air. That's again why you're not using a lot of gluten, because you need the leavener to create bubbles to lighten it. Otherwise, you just have a really heavy chunk and mass of Blondie. So you need this really wonderful balance of your flavor, the ability to have air, and the ingredients that support structure like your eggs and your flour, but not so much that it becomes tough. I use melted butter because I don't want the air. I don't want large air cells that make my Blondie into a cake. I want it to be dense and chewy. And I know dense isn't a good word for baking, but I want a certain texture. And so that's why my chocolate chip cookie last week had melted butter. Oftentimes when I do recipes and I teach them, there's one thing that ties the concepts together. And melted butter is a concept we did last week and we're doing it this week. And we're doing it for the same reasons, but the ingredients supporting are different. Last week we used AP flour and we used baking soda. This week we're using pastry and a lot more egg, which has a lot more moisture and a lot more structure, and baking powder, which is going to give us a good extra boost at the end of baking, because the baking soda is going to activate very quickly. And then you get low bench tolerance where like it just blows all the CO2 and then you have nothing toward the end. So we are going to build this perfect system of structure, flavor, ingredients that caramelize, and have flavor. And then we're going to add things that give us crunch. And that's where we get the alchemy and we end up with this beautiful Blondie. This is the practice of pastry. I believe in building a practice where every time you do something, you do it at the best of your ability. And over time, you get really good and you build a really strong practice with all good habits. And as you build your knowledge and understanding, you get better over time, just like you do when you practice anything. And so on Wednesdays, I am demoing and discussing a specific recipe that I will announce every Sunday night and put up on my link tree on my profile page. And then on Wednesdays, I'm going to do what I do. And then you guys can hopefully make it in your home if you want. And taking everything that I tell you, all the caveats, all the worry about the ingredients, making sure you have the right flour and the right everything. And if you miss a live, you can go watch the live recap, which is just an edited version of this on YouTube, and then come back on Sunday and you can ask questions because I won't be baking. I won't be baking on Sunday. I mean, I might, but I'm not going to demo. So there's going to be just talking and answering your questions because I want this to be about you. Is there a difference if I use fine granulated versus regular granulated? In a melted butter there is, because in confectionery where you want your sucroses to dissolve, you're going to use a finer grains. We are using brown sugar because of the flavor and the moisture that it imparts, because we want this to stay moist. This Blondie, just so you know, will taste just as good tomorrow as it will in a week. It holds the moisture for so long, it's insane. So we bake on Wednesdays and we come back and talk about it on Sundays, and you can always DM me or make comments and ask questions if you are looking for pans or ingredients or have any questions. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this on low, and then this is the butter, and you can see that yes, it's not hot, it's not thin, it's just melted. So it's a good amount. And then I am going to switch my spatula. And when you mix the sugar like this, nothing's really happening. It's not gonna change it. So I'm gonna add just a little bit. Now we used to bake this Blondie at 360 for 55 minutes, but that was a commercial oven that had like a deck, so there was a lot of heat coming from underneath. I am going to do this at around 55 because they got a little dark on the outside and I'd like them to cook on the inside just a little more. So 55 minutes to an hour on 355. My favorite book, if you want to become a better baker, is How Baking Works. It's not a cookbook. It's almost like an encyclopedia where you just look up what you need. So when I'm getting ready for these lectures and demos, I'll just look up ingredients because sometimes I don't remember the amounts. Like brown sugar has 3 to 4% moisture. I don't always remember stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead and put the vanilla in here. That's the vanilla bean paste. Vanilla bean paste has a lot of different things in it, but sometimes it has stabilizers like xanthan. It has vanilla extract, and it has spent vanilla beans from the process of these companies making vanilla bean extract. And this is from Nielsen Massey, and I do love it, and I'm going to show you what's going on in here. So you can see, ouch, that the oil is floating around in the top, so it's not emulsified at all. Emulsification means the two things are coming together that don't like each other, just like when you make a salad dressing with oil and water. And sometimes with salad dressings, they come apart right away when you stop shaking them. Other times they're emulsified with chemicals or with mechanical, and they stay together longer. That's a strong emulsion. So I'm gonna go get my sifter. I'll be right back. And I'm gonna sift my dry ingredients. Now, because this is a bigger batch, I'm using a full sheet to sift over because I have a larger sifter, but I like the sheet to be wider than the sifter. And I always use a dry spatula to finish getting it through here instead of my hand. I like to keep my hands off the food. So I'm going to turn this up just a little bit, and I'm going to take the stickers off. And I put them on the countertop because if I forget something, and if you think you're not going to forget or you think you added something, I'm telling you, it is so easy to lose track. It's not even funny. I have spent, not just for myself, but plenty of time with other people looking in the garbage for labels. So I put the flour in, and then I layer in the salt and whatever. Meanwhile, this guy is on low, and it's just mixing. Obviously, it's not aerating a ton, and I don't want a lot of air because I don't want a cake. It's like a cakey brownie. Sometimes the difference between a cakey brownie and a fudgy brownie is just that it's been aerated too much. So, making a Blondie, not my favorite thing, but this particular recipe is one of my favorite things. And I have to tell you, this recipe is what I call a chef's recipe because students used to make it at school, and it wasn't all the time because it's a really expensive recipe, so I had to have students that were really committed to not making a mistake. When the other chefs would hear that it was in the bakery, they would always go grab some because it's rare and it's yummy and it's expensive. You kind of can't burn it. I mean, it's in the oven for a very long time. Even though it's winter where I am and it feels really dry, a lot of my ingredients are clumped and moist because a lot of things gather moisture. I went to the grocery store to get some brown sugar, and I ended up buying like a different brand than normal because every bag they had was hard as a rock. So I mean, it is dry, but all right. So that's my salt, baking powder, pastry flour, and it's all ready to go. Okay, let's take a look at this. see? Actually, maybe I'll take the camera off. So this is what it's looking like. You can tell it's not broken, but it's also not 100% emulsified. It's mixed together, but there are no lumps. You can still see grains, but look, you can see the vanilla bean. If I leave it, some of the butter will probably seep out, but that's okay. So again, resist the urge to add a lot of air, unless you like cakey brownies, and a lot of people do, and you should go for it. Is there water in the vanilla? It's vanilla bean paste, and so it's viscous. There's sugar, vanilla bean seeds, and oops, and this is almost gone. It's almost expired. This has cane sugar, water, vanilla extract, vanilla bean seeds, and gum tragacanth, which I actually really like way more than xanthan gum, personally. Okay, so here's where we go with the creaming method. Dry, wet, ending with dry. And you can tell, and this, I love this system because you can see how much egg is here. And it's in relationship to all of the others. So when you start to look at the percentages that are on the recipe that's on the link tree, they're going to start to make sense, because it's shocking that it's 45% egg. And then you can compare that percentage to other recipes you do and start to come up with an idea of what makes something you like and what percentages fall within a range. So when you start recipe developing, you know what you're doing. All right, so I'm gonna get everything ready because this is go time. When I start mixing this into here, the moisture is activating the flour, and I want to go low and slow. I want to stop when I need to scrape, and I want to be very aware that I don't want to toughen up my Blondie. So I use this King Arthur. It's basically like a dough scraper that's plastic, and I recommend these for kids because they can cut apples and practice things without hurting themselves. I just love it. So first I'm going to add 1/3 of the dry. And I actually like to position the paddle so that I can get this under and behind it so that I don't ploop it out. Ploop. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying ploop. Okay. Great. So I like toggling the paddle. It just keeps it from flying all over the place. And as soon as it's kind of not at risk of flying around, I'm going to add half of the egg. Turn it up just like that, and then turn it off. And I'm going to add another 1/3 of the flour. And I also like this because if I get any on the counter, it's really easy to clean it all up. I never lose flour to the countertop. Okay. I'm going to toggle it. And then I'm going to add the rest of the egg, kind of slowly, maybe turn the speed up here and there, just to help it incorporate faster and easier. And then I'm going to turn it off, and I will show you what I have in here. But I really like scraping as a means of combining where you're not agitating the gluten, but you are mixing. Sifting is not always just about aerating your ingredients. It's often about beginning cohesion, because in essence, good baking is good cohesion. All right. I don't know if you can see there's like butter floating around, so I'm just going to go around the edges and on the bottom and begin to tell this stuff to go together. Not a big deal. I'm not stirring it. I'm just giving it a little bit of a hand. And it just makes a big deal. And I don't care how many times you stop the paddle. It's not the stopping that's a problem. Now, you don't want to take forever because you don't want things to begin to activate and you've lost time. Here are the pecans that I toasted earlier, ready to go in. And then I'm going to take what is left of the flour and I'm going to add it. Always on low. What's great about this is I'm going to use this parchment to bake the whole thing on. And you can get your pan ready in advance and spray it, but I did not because of being in this situation, basically. So I'm going to scrape the edges one more time, and you're going to see what I'm scraping for. I don't know if you can see this, but you see it's stretchy. It's very viscous because of the high sugar and fat content. So you've got a really nice solution of liquid, and the flour is just there to give it a little bit of structure. It's going to be so tender. This thing is so heavy. Well, there you go. So there's flour on the edges, and I'm going to scrape the edges to the bottom, and then I'm going to finish it on the paddle very briefly. And then I'm going to add, with the mixer off, chocolate chips and the pecans. So this is a Blondie. A lot of times Blondies are very sweet. I don't think they have a ton of flavor. I just think they're, and then I love these, and I love pecans when they're well cooked and caramelized and delicious and done properly. But when you have most Blondies, it's like it's sweet, and then you get a bite of bitter pecan. It's not good. So this is about melding all of this together, to almost to the point when you take a bite, you're like, it's not separated. It's all together. I'm going to scrape it one more time. I don't like there to be any flour on the edges. There's just no reason for it. And this fits into a half sheet tray, this Blondie recipe. This is a 4.5 quart mixer, half sheet tray. It makes a lot of 2.5 inch square Blondies. So if you have a business where you have limited space and you have an oven that, you know, won't hold a full sheet, this is a money maker, and people love it, and you do have to charge a good amount for it, but once you determine the price, you're set. And I'm telling you, it lasts a week and doesn't get dry. And I'll show you, I cut it in half and I wrapped twice the halves. That can be frozen and then pulled out when you're ready to move on. So this is the kind of thing you can do in production, and then it'll make your life so much easier, and you'll always have something to pull that's already baked. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to take the pecans. This is a little dicey. It gets pretty full, but I'm okay with it. I got a little batter on the thing. And I'm going to put the white chocolate chips. They're real chocolate chips. They're not fake. They have real cocoa butter in them. They're actually couverture. The batter is good. I have to say I love eating batter. This one I don't love. Very sweet. It doesn't have a lot of flavor yet. It's in the baking that it becomes insanely good. That's what I think is so cool about this. Do you see, this is made out of metal, and they get made out of fiberglass, and it has these little cutouts here. This actually goes on the bottom like that. So I'm going to spray the edges with Pam baking spray, and that's it. As it bakes, a little bit is going to come out, but it gets caramelized. It's not a problem. So don't overthink it. All right, now that I have all of my stuff ready to go, I'm going to get rid of the stickers, and then I'm going to put this in the pan. It's going to go in the oven, and then we can chat about whatever ingredient questions or book questions or whatever you guys want to know. No, you don't want to do this. It won't fit because this is the collar part. It's just how it works. I'm telling you, it's counterintuitive. And this is from Crown Cookware, and it's welded, beautiful, heavy gauge aluminum. But if you do it, that's how it goes. I'm giving you some insider. I mean, everyone does it wrong. So live and learn. Can you please show the name of the chocolate again, and where'd you get the metal pan? Crown Cookware in Canada. They're lovely people. I love them. And they make these. And I've been buying from them for like 25 years. And my original cake pans that I used to when I was a cake decorator are from them. This is like $21. This is for a half sheet. All right, so here we go. So this is very full. Did you see that? So I could put plastic wrap around here, but I'm just gonna put it on low, and I'm gonna follow it like this. It's fine. However, I don't wanna overwork the batter, so I'm going to stop it, and I'm just gonna lift the paddle and put it back down, and maybe do that a little bit. So I'm gonna do it. Some might come out, don't freak out. And I can take my spatula and do a quick, and there. So if you're thinking you're not going to chop up your pecans because they're going to get broken up, they're not. Because it's a very brief, very brief moment in the bowl. Okay, so I'm going to get this in the pan and it's going in the oven. Now I've thought about, like, could you add finishing salt to the top and all that? You know, it has a good amount of salt in it. If you wanted to put more salt, I don't think it would actually be a bad thing. But you don't need to, and I will eat just a little bit. It's just really sweet. The high concentration of sugar and egg and nuts and all the things that are going to react to the Maillard reaction, the sugar and the proteins, the butter. So I know people love brown butter, but think about it this way. All of the butter that's in here right now, if you caramelize it, it's not exactly like brown butter, but you're doing the same thing. And a lot of the moisture gets steamed off in the oven. So I'm going to clean this way better. I'm just moving it out of the way. But I will take my towel and I will get every crevice and I'll look underneath and really make love to it. So that's why, because I do love it. 30 years old. All right. So I mean, this is easy, but the nuance is in having the nerve to bake it a really long time. And you do have to have a little bit of nerve because it gets really dark. I'm gonna let you look at it. It's very pretty. Okay, I'm gonna spray this guy, and I really just need to get the metal parts. And it pops right out. And the reason I'm using metal is because I want caramelization, so I want good heat transfer. If you're using a silicone baking tray, you're gonna get insulation. If you're using a Silpat, you're gonna get insulation. If you use 2 pans, insulation. This way, I get caramelization, caramelization, caramelization. Heat transfer all the way around. Okay. Woo! All right, so I'm gonna just give this a swirl to make sure I don't have any, you know, areas that are full of nuts and chocolate chips and other areas that aren't. And then I'm going to put it, and I always aim for the center. It's not a good practice when you're pouring things in to move it around. You don't need to move it around. You want to put it right in the middle, and then we'll move it around with a spatula. And we don't want to overwork this when we get it in the pan. We want it to settle into the edges, and then we want to get it in the oven. And I hope you work a lot faster than I did. Focus, pay attention, don't talk. Woo! It's getting warm in here. The good thing about baking, you really kind of never go cold. I start out cold every day, but then I warm right up. All right, there we go. So it looks like that. My little handy dandy 4-inch offset. And I'm not gonna push. And I'm certainly not gonna push it all the way to the edge and pull it back. I'm gonna wiggle and move it toward, and I'm gonna turn the pan so that I'm using a lot of just the natural nature of the batter to get it into the corners, but I'm not even pushing it all the way up to them. Just near. Because if you push it against the wall and it gets up here and it's clinging, that's gonna bake first and then it's gonna get a big divot and it's gonna bake. That's why that happens with brownies. So I'm gonna go ahead, take a look at it, make sure it's pretty level, but I did not have to push it into the edges. All right, see? And this is going in the oven, and you can come with me. I'm gonna leave it at 350, and I'm gonna set the timer for 45 minutes. Whew, okay. That's all right, now we can get to your questions. I'm gonna take my apron off because I'm not working anymore. Apron is for keeping your clothes clean and for not wiping your hands on. And it's a sanitary issue, so you don't want to be dragging it into the bathroom or outside. All right, let's get to it. That is the Blondie. I eat raw batter and you're not supposed to. So that's one of those do as I say, not as I do. I'm not afraid. If I got an upset stomach, I probably would stop. First of all, this is a chocolate. This is a real couverture, but they look like chocolate chips. And because it's inside the batter, they will hold their shape, but they really do look like chocolate chips. They're just creamier, better than the Ghirardelli. So I don't know another brand, but I'm gonna start testing. I think at some point you have to try enough that you have an opinion. But when you have your basic stuff, especially in the school, we just used the Calabo because we had a good relationship with them at all the schools I worked at. You stop testing around, and now that I'm buying in weird quantities and kind of from all over, it is like in my face, this is not good. And I'm shocked because I would have said I loved Ghirardelli, and I know a lot of people don't like white chocolate, but I do. I like everything. So, you know, I said that the batter would go out the edges. These are the parts that go out the edges, and I save them because this is like, it looks like a biscotti. This is the Blondie that squeezed out the bottom and is caramelized, and it is so good. Tastes like butter that's been caramelized. Okay. It's almost like confection. It's almost like candy. All right, so when I made the 9 by 13, I took the quarter tray amount and put it in a 9 by 13, and it's too thin. So this is too thin because when I did the half sheet properly, this is the difference. Big difference. So I adjusted the 9 by 13. I added like 7%. This still tastes fine, and it's certainly baked nice and everything. It's just you want it thicker. When it's you know, it's something about, it's like luxurious, and this just is not luxurious. It tasted good, but it's not luxurious. So I've wrapped this twice. If I want, I can put it right into the freezer. Cut off the edges, the crunchy part, all the way around using a ruler, and then you cut these into little pieces, and these become Blondie bites, and you can put them in a little clear cup or a little bag. Today I sent them to work with my husband. I put them in a deli cup. Then you take the rest, and I think the prettiest way to cut a tree is in a square. If you cut them into squares, you can, if you do 2.5-inch squares, you can stack 3 into a bag. Actually, you know what? I'll take you with me because it's my storage area, and it's fun to go see. This is my kitchen. Let's take a look at what there you go. It's very liquid. It's not doing much yet. But this is my storage room, and this is where I keep packaging and my printer. It's nice and cool in here, and all my tools and supplies. And over here I have all of my binders and information from classes. Those notebooks, I always do classes and I retype everything and get them bound. So I have, you know, ribbon and things that I need. And here's my packaging. These bags, little bags with the front, you can get these from any packaging online. And you just stack 3 2.5 square. And then you can write right on it or put a little sticker on it. And this is just where I keep a lot of my pans and my stuff. And that's it. I put 3 recipes on the link tree. The PDF has half, quarter, so you have to be careful and read the top. The 9 by, yep, it's a 28% recipe. And the instructions are pretty much the same as what I told you. The only difference really was that I added the vanilla bean paste to the fat. And I think it's going to be a good improvement. So I like cutting them into squares, cut off the edges. Those can go in a bag. The Blondie bites are good. They're like caramelized and yummy. Then you're giving people a thick, perfectly square, beautiful. And it looks really pretty when you cut it because then you can see all of the chocolate chips and the nuts, and that's what's really pretty. Do I eat warm baked goods right out of the oven? Yes. I like them to cool. I like a little structure. And I've also heard that if you eat it right out of the oven, it hasn't dissipated all the gases, and those can go right into your stomach. I actually like things when they've solidified a bit. One thing that I will do often is make the big batch and then just fill my smaller pan up to 60% where I want it to be. And this is not going to rise a lot. So wherever you put it, it's going to stay there. So you could make a bigger batch and then fill your pan all the way where you want it, nice and deep, and then put the rest into a smaller pan. It doesn't matter if it's round or square. Okay, look. All right, so I'm going to tell you straight up, I want to bake this longer. That's why I lowered the temp by 5 degrees, and I'm going to go longer. But you can see how dark the crust is, and it's very moist, and you might like it like this. I just know I don't want the outside darker and drier, but I definitely want to roast it. You know, roasting means that you're roasting it all the way through to the middle, to the heart of the bar. So I want to bake it all the way through to the middle. So I lowered the temp by 5 degrees. I'm going to cook it just a little bit longer, and it's delish. Delish. So the original recipe is a whole sheet tray. So I cut it down to half. That's a half sheet tray. That's still a lot. And then if you have an official quarter sheet tray, then you're going to go down to 25. From 100 to 50 to 25. When I talk about the practice of pastry, I am talking about all of you understanding ingredient function, understanding that this was a creaming method and I melted the butter. And beyond that, if you understand pastry flour and brown sugar and butter and you understand, you can begin to know when a recipe looks good, when it has red flags. You will build an intuition and you're starting to build a frame of reference that is going to empower you with this professional information. So we are literally closing the gap between the professionals and the home baker. The only difference between professionals and home bakers is like one day of professional baking school. If you break all this down and you begin to think like the ingredient and understand that you can't swap or change or remove or decrease unless you know what that ingredient is doing in the recipe you're working on, what the other ingredient or what the effect will be if you reduce or add. That's why I give you ideas and I explain it, but I am not ever just going to be really definitive about certain things because I want you to build that in. I hope that makes sense because I know that we have a culture of having a good time in the bake shop. Oh, it's just fun, you know, let's just dump it all in the bowl and juggle all our ingredients and have our hair down and fingernails and jewelry, and it's a fashion show while we're baking. But in reality, baking ingredients are very expensive. It's very time consuming. If you make a mistake, it's very frustrating. And it's really important that you respect the ingredients, the work, and that you identify the outcome, and everything you do is trying to get there. And you will no longer be clinging to 5 paragraphs of ridiculous instructions. You will have the grams, the total weight, the percentages, and the method. Creaming method, melted butter, boom. In this case, because typically it's 350, I went ahead and wrote 360 or wrote 355. But if everything in a baking kitchen is like pretty normal, you don't write it down. You don't say sift it out or add the dries and then the wets. You say the creaming method. So I am literally handing you this information and encouraging you to begin to do the work and have some skin in the game so that you can become knowledgeable. I don't own this information, and you shouldn't have to pay a fortune to go get it. You should be able to share it with professionals, no gatekeeping, and just open, honest discussion. It's a science and an art form. Absolutely. Lean on both. That's why if you go to my profile page, you'll see that I have fun. I love making meringues, and darn, if they're grainy, I almost won't even post the video. Like, I might be making twigs and mushrooms and having a really artistic fun time, but I'm also very determined that everything is good. And it's frustrating because sometimes my videos, people will say, well, that's too loose. And it's like, well, I added cocoa butter. So yeah, it loosened up. There's more to the story. You can't always squeeze really big concepts into 4 minutes. So that's why everything that I'm doing is a practice, because over time you get better. Over time you learn. We don't learn lots of information all at once. We learn it in different ways, hearing it, seeing it, doing it, touching it, thinking about it, watching it, you know, all those different things. And then we begin to internalize a system where we're the professional. You're in charge, which is so exciting. If we don't have the pan adapter, will a cake pan work? Absolutely. The only reason, this is my answer to a lot of things, that I use a cake collar is because in a professional kitchen, you're gonna have a stack of sheet pans and that's it. You're gonna make everything in there. So you're gonna have cake collars. You're not going to have a bunch of pans. There should be a healthy respect, and being creative and having a good time doesn't matter to the ingredients, because the ingredients are gonna ingredient, and you can make them. You think you're gonna bully an ingredient. You don't bully ingredients, they bully each other. The sugar is gonna bully everybody, but if you think you're just gonna take sugar out or add sugar, or you're just gonna swap things and take moisture out and just add an egg yolk, add non-fat milk solids and stuff like that, that's you exerting your ego onto the baking. And I have to say, with all your questions, I've kind of been deconstructing where all these rumors are coming from. And it's frustrating because they're coming from some very reputable people. I don't read other people's articles or Reddits. I read the primary information and then I synthesize it as the expert. So when I find out that someone very important has recommended these things willy-nilly, I just cringe and I think, if people don't understand ingredient function, you're giving them creative license to make a mistake. And so if you're frustrated in your baking, you need to take a step back, let your ego go, and pay attention to the scaling and the process. I'm doing these demos and lectures and question and answer periods every Wednesday at 6 p.m. I am committing to that. And if you can't catch me, go to YouTube and watch the entire lecture and demo edited on YouTube. If you are on Substack, you can print out my ingredient chart and all of the ingredient functions and how they work in specifically the recipe we're working on, because this week we're working on a Blondie. The recipe lives on my link tree. You watch the demo and lecture, ask questions, and then you make it if you want. And then you come back on Sunday and we talk about problems, questions, successes, and we just have a good time commiserating. I just think that this is a great opportunity to share the deeper passion, because some of you are as intense as I am. You're reading articles, you're learning, you're digging deep, you're asking very challenging questions, and I love it. How to study ingredients with the right sources. How Baking Works, number 1, Paula Fagoni, How Baking Works. I don't even like the articles that tell you what to do, because they're so long and they tell a story, and it's like, just tell me how much water's in the butter. Just tell me how much protein. Just tell me how it interacts with other things. And How Baking Works does that. A textbook. I love textbooks. So I have a list on my link tree, a PDF of all my favorite textbooks, books, and resources for everything from cake decorating to bread to chocolate and confections and just basic baking. What do you think about putting pretzels in Blondies? What I say about everything is, sounds like it's not bad, they're all kind of similar. I tend to not use any ingredients that are pre-made. I like to make everything from scratch. That's why when people send me recipes with like Nutella in them or crunched up cookies that are from there's no problem with that. That's just not how I work. I'm not interested in crunching up stuff other people made. But pretzels fall into the category chocolate chip, and I don't make chocolate chips. But I recently made some cookies with pretzels in it. They were like natural. It was terrible. They did not absorb enough moisture, and I didn't like it. But here's what I ask. Make the Blondie the way it's written at least once, and then go ahead and do something. I just think, first of all, I would never change somebody's recipe until I've made it once. And it is an inclusion, so it's not going to hurt, but you need to kind of get eyes on how dark is that going to get, and are you going to have problems scorching those? But I think they would taste good. White chocolate is sometimes cocoa butter, and sometimes it's fake, vanillin. It's vegetable fats, okay? So you have to be a label reader. The Calibo white chocolate, this is 28% cocoa solids. So that's cocoa butter. So yeah, they make white chocolate with real cocoa butter. And sometimes you're looking at brands that are all vegetable oils and fats. So you have to read the label. Can I substitute coconut sugar from brown sugar in the Blondie recipe? I would not. They are very different. And I don't have time to go into all of it. And I would have to double check exactly how, but it's a very expensive recipe, number 1. I've never done that. And if you do it, you're going to want to take this recipe and make a very small test batch. And then you'll know. So you'll have to be a recipe tester. I think taking one recipe, we made the chocolate chip cookie recipe last week with the melted butter. If you left the butter solid and creamed it and then made a cookie, you would be able to compare very well, but only change one thing. Either one ingredient or one method or one variable. If you change the temperature and the style of method, then you're never going to know. So change one thing at a time. I read baking resources every single day obsessively. And I take notes. I take a lot of notes. I mean, this is my brownie, you know. These are the notes for this one recipe. This lives on Substack. I'm constantly taking notes. In the end, if it's something I'm familiar with and a recipe I've done a lot, like this one, it's all here. If it's something new, I have to go check. If I'm answering one of your questions, I want to make sure I'm right. Half the time, I'm going to the references to confirm that I'm right. I don't want to give the wrong information, but I've internalized a lot. I've learned so much in the last few years, so much. I have 7 minutes left on the clock on the Blondie. It's been in the oven now for about 40 minutes, and I mixed it using the creaming method, and it's delicious. So do you recommend baking with measurement cups, spoons, or a scale? Well, anyone who's been watching me here knows that I only use scales and I only use grams. And I use the baker's appendix to make most of my conversions, and I only use one source. I don't jump around. But cups and spoons need to be thrown away. They are wildly inaccurate, messy, tedious, and I can't stand them. And I really wish we'd move on. Everyone else in the world is using metrics and a scale. And when people come into their first day of baking class, professional seeking students, nobody baby steps them into it. You get a scale and you're done. You just move on. It's so much easier. There are fewer dishes and I'm totally into it. I use vanilla bean paste instead of vanilla extract, and it's not all the time, but in this recipe because it has less moisture. Please confirm that I need a jewelry scale so I can weigh out 1/4 teaspoons. You do. And my jewelry scale is from Amazon. It cost me $9.99. When I am converting recipes and I need to take a 1/4 teaspoon and divide it by 3, using grams is a game changer. It will change your life. You'll love it. Ooh. Puffed up a little. Okay, ready? Because I'm just going to open the door quickly. It's starting to get dark. And I don't know if you think that's too dark, but we are going to keep going. 45 minutes. I'm going to put this for 15. I know that sounds crazy, but I already know I'm going to go 15, and I might even go an extra 5. I am not going to worry about those edges being super brown because I am going to cut. I'm going to use my serrated knife to cut a blondie. I'm going to cut off those sides and just use the middle, and I don't think this was baked enough in the middle. So maybe I'll turn this down 5 degrees. Okay. I'm going to cut the edge off, and then I'm going to cut a piece. I'm going to end up eating. I ate like 1.5 of these this morning. Yeah, I would like it to be a little more cooked in the middle. It's not that it was soft or mushy or anything. So here's the edge. Absolutely beautiful. That's the edge. You can see that there's plenty of leavener, plenty of bubble, lots of bubble and caramelization on the bottom. I'd be looking at this, how thick is that? I like that you can see the pecans and the white chocolate. I told you the white chocolate would turn brown. It's caramelized. And then this is an edge. This is the driest piece, and look, so soft, so yummy. And you see nice bubbles in there. So this is an interior piece, and you can see it's a little soft. But there's the caramelized white chocolate and the pecan. And you know what? I think I could even go a little darker on the pecans because they're kind of buried in here. So if I were to bring it to fragrant, 4 minutes at 350 to bring the nuts before you add them to the batter in the oven for 4 minutes to dry them out, take them a little longer, but there is... Okay, so then that's the top. I think it's very pretty. It's shiny. And then this isn't super thick, so I definitely think I can go longer. You guys are going to be shocked when you see how long I bake it. It's so soft. So that white chocolate chip in there is like brown. Tastes completely different than when we started. So good. I think I dropped some. Yeah, it's just too soft for me. It's chewy, it's rich, good flavor, but I'm going to go longer. All right. Now hopefully this will give you all an idea of how long this is take. This is going to be 60 minutes at 355. Yeah, and this will taste even better tomorrow, but this will be soft in a week if it's wrapped. Vanilla bean paste, I would buy it. It's convenient, you get consistency. I want consistency across every avenue that I can get consistency. I want consistency. You will need 2 kitchen scales. You should be able to get a scale like this that scales up to 10 pounds for between $20 and $40. This one was probably $69 or $89, but it's really old. When I say old, I'm saying 9 years old. So whatever you buy, it's a good investment. And then this was a jewelry scale from Amazon, $9.99, and this is for everything under 20 grams, which is things like, you know, your salts and baking soda and things like that. I heard a really very successful world pastry champ one time say, chefs are just problem solvers, that's all we do. It's starting to smell good, which is a sign of doneness. And like I said, the timer tells you nothing. It tells you something's in the oven. It does not tell you when something is done. You know, I would often have students flip out. It's done, the alarm. I'm like, you have to use your own mind to know when something's done. The timer doesn't tell you when it's done. You get to ascertain when something is done. Let's go take a look. Ovens take a while to heat up in general, and you should respect that because that's why I use an oven thermometer. All right, let's take a look. It's getting very dark, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it out a little bit. So I'm gonna just keep going a little bit. It's not gonna hurt it. I'm gonna go 10 more minutes and then I might pull it. The reason I didn't pull it out is because I just showed you that baking it exactly that way gave me too soft, too wet. So I want to keep going. Yep, I would toast the pecans a little bit longer. Yep, take them a little bit longer. So maybe 6 minutes at 350. You don't want too much color, but a little bit of color, fragrance and a little color. And in some ways, I don't even care how long it takes to bake. That's the honest answer. But it really comes down to, regardless of the oven, of what you think of last time, every single time you bake something, it is an opportunity for you to decide if it's done. It's not a foregone conclusion. I did lower the temp by 5 degrees. I'm gonna take it out after this. I'm gonna make this probably 2 more times for Sunday. But I'm gonna toast the pecans again, a little longer. I'm gonna see, but I like the thickness of this. If this was something that tomorrow you wanted to put in your shop, coffee shop or whatever, and you're gonna do a half sheet, you're gonna have it dialed in very quickly. You'll see. Do not use convection. Convection cooks the top too fast and gets really dark, and then it's not gonna be baked inside. Just like a nice roasting, slow roast. What do you do with all your test bakes? I eat them. I do. I send them to work with my husband. I give them to the neighbors. And if they aren't good, I refuse to give. Like the other day when I made that brownie was not good. Like I did not like it at all. And I never say that about anything. I will eat anything and I can find, it was bland. It was very weird. And I composted it. I hope that doesn't make people mad, but I wasn't going to give it away. I didn't like it. Have you done a tool organization kitchen tour? I have. I've done them. When I went back to school, I went to pastry school. I literally looked into becoming a professional organizer. And I went to pastry school instead. Convection is really good for like things that you want to get crunchy, crispy, fast, like cookies, tuile. You're gonna have to adjust the temp down. It's the airflow. So you're like getting the outside baked quicker. So it's a thinner, crispier type deal. All right, so we're gonna be taking this Blondie out soon. So I will be here every Wednesday at 6 doing a new recipe. And then on Sundays, I'll come back at noon Eastern Standard Time to talk more about how the recipe performed in your home and the finished product, and just answer questions and talk. So Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time, I will be here. And then at the end of that, I'll announce what our recipe is for next week. I'll post the recipe, and then we'll meet again Wednesday and we'll do a whole new recipe. What's your first memory of baking? My first memory of baking was making the Jiffy boxes. We always had the brownie and the cornbread in our house, and I would always do that. My dad also, twice a year, would make a huge batch of bread, just for some reason, just a couple times a year. And he actually wouldn't let us help, but I would always sit there and watch. But all right, time to take it out. Very dark, and it's sizzling. I have confidence in this because, like I said, the edges are going to be trimmed off and the inside's going to be amazing, and the edges are going to be good anyway. But let me pull it into the light and give you a little better look at it. But this cake collar will pop right off. It's going to be delicious, I can tell. And this is my rack that I use to cool a lot of things on. It just moves around my kitchen. I got it at IKEA. It's wonderful. It allows for good airflow. There we go. Now, this will take a long time to cool, hours. And then you want to wrap it up tight and then cut it. Put all my favorite books on a PDF on the link tree. And my recipe for the Blondie is on the link tree. I'll be back on Sunday at noon to do a follow-up discussion, and I hope that you all bake the Blondie. If you don't and you're just curious, come back. Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time. I'm outside of New York in the US at noon on Sunday. I will be here. I've been so focused on TikTok, and it is so time consuming to make a 5-minute video every single day. It is my whole life. So if I could make this simpler, I would love to, but it just seems like anything I do is just so time consuming. I don't know why I'm too like obsessive. The most complex recipe I enjoy making is a pétivier, my favorite by far. It's a puff pastry with almond cream in it, with the beautiful cuts. Gorge, love it. I don't make it that often. Will you go over wrapping and timing of when you can cut tomorrow? Can you cut the edges off now? No. Leave the Blondie in the pan until it's cool, and you're gonna feel underneath it. If you wrap it while it even has a tiny bit of heat, and your hand will tell you underneath, it's probably still really hot. Yeah, it's screaming hot. For some reason, it really holds the heat. It's like oatmeal. So you want no heat on it, and then you want to wrap it twice, airtight. Then you want to cut it when you are ready to serve it. If you are going to cut it in half to save half, you're going to wrap the half twice and then pop it in the freezer. You don't want any of this exposed to the air any longer than it needs to be, and you don't want to rush it. And use a serrated knife. You want to saw baked goods. I showed you the bubbles, and if you don't use a serrated knife, you're gonna drag that crumb down. We just spent 45 minutes mixing air bubbles and adding baking powder and being really careful and gentle and lovely. And so you wanna make sure that all the way down to how you cool it, when you cut it, storing it, and everything, you want it to get all the way to the end, the finish line, and to be good. Wrapping is very important. You wanna get it all the way cool. The plastic wrap should be longer than your baked goods are wide, but I'll tell you what the trick of plastic wrap is. So you want to pull this up and stretch it and pull it down. So then when I'm gonna flip it over, I'm gonna pull this out like that and straighten it out. The key to cling wrap is you have to stretch it out and then pull it up. That's how the tension is what holds it tight, the tension like that. So you want to lift it up and pull it and lift and pull. And then I'll wrap it again. So you want to pull tight because it sticks to itself. Lift and pull and then make it grab on. And if you need to take a second to straighten it out, and then lift and pull. So you want to get it all the way cool and then wrap it tight unless you're ready to serve it. So there you go. And it's nice and bouncy and good. The good thing about this recipe, like I said, is it will last forever and it's super moist. I could leave the Blondie out overnight unwrapped and it'll still be good tomorrow. I'm not going to, but I mean, it's very moist. This is the corner part, which is the most dark part, and it's soft. So very excited. I think we might be winding down. The first rule of pastry and baking is to be around people who like it. I think we've achieved that, which is great. The POP is the practice of pastry. We have a baking club that meets on Wednesdays and Sundays. Wednesdays at 6 p.m., Sunday at noon. I post recipes on Sunday night for the next week. We all do the same recipe. On Wednesdays, I demo and lecture, and then on Sundays we come back and commiserate and ask questions and talk about it. So the club is free. All you have to do is meet me here, and if you miss, find my videos edited and ready to go on YouTube, and you can catch up at any time whenever it's convenient for you. You can bake when it's convenient for you, and I am dedicated to finding recipes that can be done with average ingredients, with your average tools in your normal home. So I was a home baker, taught myself for years, then I became a professional. So I've done everything from cake decorating to working in artisan bakeries and country clubs and all. I've done a lot. So I'm just here to share what I know, and with no gatekeeping. And I want to bridge the gap between professional bakers and home bakers, because there's no reason that you can't use the same methods and concepts that they do in a commercial kitchen, because in a commercial kitchen, everything they're doing is for ease, 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 ease. Nothing is harder, messier, or more tedious. Actually working out of the home is harder and more tedious. So I think I'm gonna wind it down here. It's 9 p.m. my time. I've been here since 6, 3 hours. You guys are amazing. See you Sunday. Bye, happy baking.